What do you think of the fact that this actually happened? Like, what's your read on it? And what is your read on Mark Carney's response?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a thing like this actually moves votes. I think for conservatives, though, it's just the sheer level of righteousness the Liberal Party has when they talk about, the conservatives bring in American-style politics, and the conservatives spread misinformation or disinformation, and you see something like this happen, right? I think for a lot of conservative folks as well, it's hard to believe it was just one or two rogue staffers that just went out and did this. This had to be condoned or, at least ordered from some of the more higher levels of the Liberal campaign. And so I think, one, it points to the fact that how central comparing Pierre to Trump is to the Liberal campaign, the lengths they'll go to kind of make that true. But I think, too, for people who are following this story, I think that comparison, this diminishes the credibility when the Liberals actually say this, right? People who are watching this and understand this are understanding that maybe the Liberals are going, a bit over the edge trying to make this comparison true because they understand how much people in Canadian actually despise or hate Trump right now.
Laura, what is your take on how this was handled and the fact that it even took place at all?
I mean, it's like watching an episode of Veep, really.
Yeah.
And let's be real, this story is going to be used by all campaigns as a what not to do as a political staffer for probably the next decade.
The bragging part or the doing it part?
Oh, probably both at this point.
Should be both.
But let's be clear, this was a really bad mistake, and it shows a lot of immaturity on the part of those who cooperated or did it or whatever the case may be. And it's so frustrating to watch, too, because Pierre Poilievre had enough of a Trump problem. He actually didn't need the help, so there was not really a need to do this. And the Liberals have been running a good campaign, and instead now Mark Carney's had to come out and apologize. We've taken up a lot of the news cycle for the last 24 hours for something that really wasn't necessary in a campaign that was going pretty well.
I thought the interesting part for me, Kathleen, is the degree to which the Liberals have been critical of, in particular, the Conservatives, of being divisive or negative at a time of crisis, right? When you don't want to exacerbate issues that exist in the face of the threat that we face from Donald Trump. It's hard to, like, tell people not to do something and do that very thing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're done 3 weeks of the campaign. In dog years, we're at 161 days, if you do the math. Everyone in every campaign war room has run out of clean underwear and is living off carbs only. I think really, like, the exhaustion is setting in. But when I look back at this campaign, it's interesting because this has spilled a lot of ink, this button gate, let's call it that, as have the comments of my colleague, Corey tonight.
We're getting to that in a second.
And it's interesting, right? Because it's like the parties are eating themselves because there's no other headline. So some junior Liberal staffer somewhere has costed Mark Carney basically about $1 million, maybe $1.5 million, because that's what each day on the campaign costs you, almost like $500,000 or more. Similarly, Corey tonight has, hurt the Conservatives considerably with a number of stories that have been written by his comments. And I'm just like, I really think that Canadians want us to talk about other things, And I don't want to get all Pollyanna on everybody, but I mean, there is a health crisis out there. And in a couple days, we'll have a debate. And I know we're going to talk about the debate soon, but we're not even talking about health care really on the campaign, or it's not even scheduled as a topic in the debates. Instead, we're talking about, buttons that were dropped off at a conference and, a pundit like myself, like Laura, who kind of went off on his own party. And I think that, like, it's interesting and it's fun, but I kind of do want us to steer back to kind of some of the issues before the clock runs out on this election campaign.
I get that. I think two things can be done at once. I think the reason, like Laura, for example, we just did an entire panel on crime, but I think the reason that issues like this end up factoring in is because it's because of the horse race, right? And because the polls and the degree to which they've swung have been such a part of the narrative of this race that if anything informs that one way or the other, it's like people are interested in it. But to Kathleen's point, like, obviously we've got to talk about the real issues as well. I think, both can be real in their own way.
Yeah, and I think this incident kind of, the curtain has been peeled back a bit, and, the kind of dirty tricks of the Liberal backroom have been exposed. And for political junkies, that is salacious, and people do want to hear about it. I do think it hurts or it blunts the Liberal attack somewhat on the Conservatives as being Trump-like or Trump-esque when you engage in these sorts of tactics. And I think it's fortuitous for Mr. Poilievre for this to have occurred during the debates, during debate week, because maybe some, regular people haven't really been exposed to this or wouldn't have heard about it. But when Mr. Carney, turns his laser onto Poilievre during the debate, tries to compare it to Trump, Poilievre will have kind of a response right now where he'll say, look, it was your campaign that was passing along around fake buttons, accusing us of being like Trump. So I think it does kind of blunt the attacks. Obviously, the issues of affordability, housing prices, natural resources, these are going to eat up a lot of what the debate is going to be about, what people care about. But I do think it probably benefits the Conservatives right now to have this have occurred. And I do think it's a little curious or suspicious that Mr. Carney did not fire the people who are responsible for this. They've simply been reassigned. So it does kind of beg the question as to at what level of the campaign are they operating on? Why would you not get rid of the people that are responsible for this if it is indeed so egregious to the campaign?
Okay, the other thing that Kathleen said was causing a stir. We got to talk about that as well, because Shakir, it's not just Corey tonight. It's Doug Ford today, the Premier of Ontario, was asked about Corey's comments and the wider situation with the federal Conservatives in their campaign. Let's play that clip.
Something as for Corey, I've said right from day one, he's tough as nails, but he's the best campaign manager in the country. And to be very frank, if Corey was running that campaign, I don't think Mr. Poilievre would be in the position he's in right now. But it's still a lot of time left. We still have debates. At the end of the day, the people will decide which way they want this country to move forward. But sometimes the truth hurts.
So, Shakir, I got to ask you, this kind of open war between Doug Ford Conservatives and federal Conservatives, what do you make about that? What does that do?
So I think a few things. I think for Premier Ford, I think what's remarkable about this is that for months, especially during the campaign, but even since, the beginning of this year, he was very careful in how he spoke about federal politics, and he decided today to go a bit further, right? But I also think, listen, facts matter. My party was up 25 points, when the campaign started. We lost that lead in a matter of weeks. That is concerning for myself as a Conservative who wants Pierre to win the election. I think ultimately Pierre and Ford, they're different leaders with different styles, and I think they activate different parts of the Conservative base. So Ford can say these things, right? Pierre is more of the traditional Conservative, and he has those folks motivated and enthusiastic to go out and cast the ballot. Premier Ford is more dynamic, if you will. He's a little more flexible in what he thinks and he believes, if you will, right? And I think you're seeing that the way he works with Mayor Chow, the way he worked with the federal Liberals to do things that are beneficial to Ontario. So I think he can get away with talking like that because I think he activates a different part of the Conservative movement. I would say this. I know the storyline and the headline is going to be, the two Conservative leaders are, there's some tension or perceived tension. But I think Melissa Maxwell was spot on, and I've seen it for myself. If you go beneath the leader level, MPPs, cabinet ministers, caucus members in the PC party are out campaigning for their Conservative candidates in their riding. So there's a lot of love between the two parties and the two levels of government. I just think, it's not helpful to have the Premier. It's not helpful to have Corey come out and say these things during the campaign.
Yeah, it's the timing of it. And to Shakir's point, he's bang on at the start there, where Premier Ford has gone out of his way, not to weigh in, basically, Laura. That comment is a conscious decision.
That comment was absolutely a conscious decision, but he was kind of quietly weighing in. At the start, he did say his caucus was not going to be getting involved. He also took a photo with Prime Minister Carney right before the writ dropped. So, Doug Ford has quietly, in his way, been pretty vocal, but this was a very pointed comment. It was, one of the best done backhanded insults I've heard in a long time. And to do it on that stage with that platform, he's probably the most popular conservative politician in the country right now. Certainly sends a message.
You got to be pretty sure, though, if you're Premier Ford, that the federal Conservatives will lose. What if they don't, Premier Ford? What do you do then?
Yeah, well, a couple things.
You're going to be depending on them as the biggest province, are you not? I don't know. It's pretty
true.
risky.
Or maybe he thinks, he just got a very strong mandate and he can work with whatever government. But I think actually, if you look at the polling, for many election cycles in a row now, there have been these things, what we used to call them, Trudeau-Ford switchers or liberal, progressive, conservative switchers in the province of Ontario. And I think that's very true. that voter profile, that model of voter is still very much the same. And I think that he's kind of counting on that. Remember, like in Ontario, the party there, Ford's party, is called the Progressive Conservatives still. It's not like Shakir's right to point out the difference in some ways between these two leaders and how they act. And also you reframe the whole conversation and be like, if I was a newly elected Conservative leader, i.e. if I was Pierre Poilievre and I got elected in September of 2022, who would I have been calling with almost monthly or asking for meetings quarterly? It would have been Doug Ford. And did he do that? No. So, kind of you reap what you sow.
Okay, last word. I just got about like 30 seconds that goes to you, Laura.
Well, this is now the third story I've written about Corey tonight in this election campaign, which I didn't have on my bingo card when it started. So, elections can take you in weird directions. You can take some strange turns. I think it was very personal for Doug Ford today. I think he was personally defending kind of Corey's honor, and obviously Corey's taken some heat for some comments that he's made about the campaign on your show and other places. Vashi, I think it shows there is kind of no love lost at a personal level between the two politicians, and Mr. Ford has made it clear he can and will work with anyone. And in a way, it may be kind of better for him as a Conservative in Ontario to work with a Liberal government who seems to kind of share some more policy directions with him than say, someone like Pierre Poilievre. So the dynamics are truly fascinating. I'm not sure if he knew kind of how gangbusters this comment of his would seem like almost a throwaway comment from Mr. Ford today, but it certainly is making waves in the campaign, and I think it shows, just kind of how personal this battle is somewhat at the top between the Conservative at the federal and provincial level within the Conservative movement.